Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Hi. Um, Thank you. I'm Lux Narayan. I'm the CEO and a co-founder at Unmetric. We like to describe ourselves as the social media benchmarking company, and I'll tell you why in a moment, right? But today's talk is about social media return on investment, and more importantly, why you should roll on the floor laughing when you're asked for social media ROI, right? So why you should ROFL when you're asked for social media ROI. Voltaire said this 250 years ago. Unfortunately, most of us attribute it to Uncle Ben from Spider-Man, right? But it couldn't be truer of social media. It's so amazingly powerful, but as a consequence of that, we think it ought to be responsible, right? What do I mean? And really, it's stuff we've seen across time, across media. The moment a medium takes up a fair amount of people's time and lives, we expect it to become accountable, right? And we've seen that with television. I mean, people wanted television to be accountable for itself. When the internet happened, we had so many metrics around it. We wanted it to be able to justify its existence in terms of a viable marketing medium. And we're seeing the same thing with social media as well, right? In fact, that's the way it's always been. A new medium is born, people gravitate towards it, brands see opportunity, brands spend money, there are some initial experimentation budgets, and then more often than not, once those experimentation budgets want to move from experimentation to mainstream, there is that dreaded question, where's the ROI, right? We think it's fairly unjustified asking of ROI of a lot of marketing and media, but specifically of social media. And there are four reasons why we think it doesn't make sense. So let me just touch upon each of those four reasons, right? The first one, there is no elusive magical formula that we've been trying to unearth and have been unsuccessful in so far, right? So let's stop pretending that there exists something like that. I mean, think about it. As a race, we've solved Fermat's last theorem. We found Higgs boson. We've done amazing stuff. We should have been able to crack this over a weekend, right? It can't be that complicated. And the reason we haven't done it is because it doesn't exist. There is no mythical, magical formula that's eluding us, right? So let's stop pretending we just haven't discovered it. This is the burden of information. This is the burden of metrics. You know, the moment you have a whole bunch of metrics, right? With social, you've got so many dimensions, so many metrics. I mean, I know because our product covers all those metrics. But the moment you've got so many metrics, likes and comments and shares and everything in between, people think that getting a simple singular number like ROI should be a no-brainer, right? Because there are so many metrics. We saw that with the internet. I mean, there are so many metrics. People said, obviously, everything should be quantifiable. Everything is not necessarily quantifiable. ROI is not quantifiable in this case. And the reason that is so is because ROI is a term from project finance, right? Marketing loves to borrow terms from other domains. I mean, from battle and warfare and things like that, and from project finance, right? ROI is a term that makes sense in project finance because you're talking about a project, and in the investment bucket, you're adding up every single thing that goes into delivering those returns, right? You're adding up the cost of manpower, the cost of a plant, the cost of machinery, and then you're saying, okay, these are the returns of all these inputs, and therefore you have a big return and a big investment and a return on investment, which makes sense. But the moment you slice and dice that, it's almost like saying there is this third plant in this particular factory, and there is a worker on the third assembly line. What's the ROI on that guy who works with the CNC lathe? I want his ROI. You can't do that. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with the marketing thing, saying, I want the ROI of that thin slice of social media that I do that pales in significance compared to my larger marketing budget. It just doesn't make sense. ROI needs to be seen in totality. It cannot be a thin slice, right? And the fourth one, which is kind of where it's unfair with things like social. I worked in television and media for close to a decade, and I can admit that we never found the exact ROI of a TV viewer, right? We could never tell our client that that TV viewer who we reached because we put your spot in a program that has a TRP of 6.3 has a return on investment of 138%. We never did that. And there is that famous saying of, I know it's just 50% of my advertising that's working, but I don't know which 50%, right? We've lived with that in mass media. We've lived with that for 90% of our budgets. Why can't we live with that for social? Nice, great, but rolling on the floor laughing will definitely not cut ice with your CFO, will definitely not get you budgets, right? So while it's nice for me to stand here and say that, it's not going to help you get those much needed budgets to do that magic on social for your brand. So what do? We think there are three ways you can look about it, but before that, let's just look at how the whole investment and returns kind of stack up, right? At the bottom of the triangle, you have different dimensions of investments. In a mass media world, which is the bottom left corner, that investment was typically buying GRPs on television. Advertising on television was buying spots with a certain TRP, which added up to GRPs, right? Gross rating points on television. So if you had a brand that had a 4-week campaign with 200 GRPs and your competitor had a 4-week campaign with 400 GRPs, you had a 33% share of voice. Yeah. But those were the investments in mass media advertising. Fast forward to the internet, which is the middle bucket there, you buy impressions, right? The third bucket, in terms of social, is kind of where it gets a little murky, because suddenly you're not, I mean, unless you're doing Facebook ads or something like that, you're not buying transactional media. Your investments are in terms of talent and people and communities and building communities and nurturing them. And it's not as transactional as buying TV spots or buying impressions on the internet, which is why we have a bit of a disconnect in trying to understand it, right? So you got these inputs. They have some intermediate matrices that they generate. In a TV world, a lot of us who worked with big brands have monitored, brand awareness and ad awareness and preference scores, which at some point, all that attention translates into desire and action and finally sales, right? So this kind of model is, and what we're trying to measure in a social media world is that slice of sales return that can be attributed to that slice of social media input, which is impossible. But we can get at it through some other ways. So for example, you can look at correlation, which honestly is the way it's always been with mass media. Advertisers have never given an ROI on TV advertising. They've established correlation. They've said, if you put 200 GRPs into television, it's going to translate into a 2% increase on unaided brand awareness and ad awareness, as we've seen historically. That ad awareness is going to increase preference by 0.8%, and therefore, this many more people preferring your brand will translate into this much more of shares. What that means is they've established correlation between the input bucket, the investments, and some intermediate metrics, those metrics and preference and sales. It's all correlation built. It's not ROI, but it establishes that input can translate into output, and that's worked. Attribution. Assuming for a moment that we know what a video viewer is worth, meaning if someone sees our ad on television, what that's worth. If social can catalyze video views, which it often does through YouTube or Facebook driving traffic to YouTube, you can, for that slice, quantify ROI, assuming you knew it in the first place for a TV ad. If I said that a single TV viewer reached is worth this much to my company, you can attribute YouTube views and Facebook driving YouTube views, on Twitter driving YouTube views, into that bucket as well. So that's one subset way of looking at it. And the third, which is kind of strong in our domain, is really benchmarking. So again, from my mass media days, we'd go to a client and we'd show them all these modeling and stuff on reach and frequency buildup. And then we'd show them a slide saying, oh, by the way, here's what the competition is spending. And that more often than not would get them to loosen their purse strings and spend, because that's the strongest motivation. If you've got a brand you're competing with who's doing 1,000 GRPs, you cannot do 200. You're going to pale in comparison, right? For television, we've had ratings and a whole bunch of things that give us share of voice and share of spend. For the internet, we have ComScore and Compete.com and Hitwise and Quantcast that give you relative traffic numbers. For social, that's where we come in. We help you understand how you stack up vis-a-vis competition. And just to clarify by way of what we don't do, the whole bunch of social media applications that help you listen, like Radiant6 and a lot of other companies, we don't do social media listening. Whole bunch of companies that help you engage with your community, like Buddy Media and Vitru and others. We don't do that. And to stretch the metaphor, we don't help you listen, we don't help you speak, we help you see what other brands are doing right and wrong with their social media presence. So that's our line, social media benchmarking for brands. And the reason that's important when you're asked the ROI question is because you can, for example, pull an Unmetric data point, and these are all screenshots from Unmetric. Even if you can't read them, let me just explain the spirit of it. This one's telling us what the content strategy is for Nokia in the last 7 days in terms of what they put out there on Facebook. More importantly, what resonates with their community, right? If Nokia has a team that's religiously and every week on week talking about new products and new features and things, that obviously requires investment in people who understand what's happening and can communicate that. And that's a great case. If Nokia is doing it and I'm a competing brand, that's a great case for me to try and get some budget for my brand as well. Twitter is a fascinating example. What you can't read in the gray box there is that Delta, on an average, in the last month, replied to more than 50 questions on Twitter, and the average response time was 11 minutes and 23 seconds, which is awesome. Think about it. Ask a question to Delta on Twitter, you're going to get an answer in less than 12 minutes. An educated, thought-out answer, which obviously has a team of people behind delivering that. And if you're an airline competing with Delta, that's a case for you to build up a team that can deliver similar metrics because your consumers expect it, because Delta is giving it. Videos on YouTube. What you can't see in the scale down there is the fact that Ford, in a short period of time, uploaded between 300 and 400 videos onto its YouTube channel. Besides some serious investment in building quality content, that's some serious investment in people taking care of that YouTube channel. So if you're someone managing a YouTube channel for your brand, you need some serious investments in terms of people to manage a channel, to have the kind of content that might stack up vis-a-vis what your competitors are doing. Because if you're doing 5 videos a week and your competitor is doing 500, good luck. Pinterest, if you want content out there that's pin-worthy and repinned and talked about and everything, you need investment. You need an investment in people who can make visually compelling content. So we think benchmarking is a great way to skirt around the ROI question because it allows you to tell your management what kind of investments your competition is doing, and that's often a strong case for you to get those investments for your brand and to stack up well vis-a-vis competition. So think outside the ROI box. There are interesting answers out there. Benchmarking is one of them. Thank you very much. I'm Lux Narayan, CEO and co-founder on Unmetric. Thank you.